Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Week in Guns, brought to you by Patriot Patch Company, VZ Grips, MAF Corporation, and FFL Payments. The show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Matthew LaRosier, and I'm joined today by the Rat Man. Ivan, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm here. And the video game Quake on the map High Rise, defending the hard point.
Whoa, that's all true. That's all 100% certifiably true. Hello, everybody. We've got a big one this week because it seems that last week was like a nothing burger week. Yep. And this week we got a whole lot of burgers and mostly bad news, which is great, I guess.
It's always good.
Yeah, it's always good. But we will have all of that mixed in. All right, first up, let's talk about Vanderstock. This was a big, important case, and, well, we've got a lot to say about this.
Yes.
So what this case was it was after the ATF first brought their rulemaking on incomplete frames or receivers, and the Biden ATF made a big fuss, right? It was spurred in large part by the Polymer 80 buy build shoot kits, but it went even further beyond that. The buy build shoot kits, that included an incomplete frame, a slide, a barrel, the locking block, all of the other stuff that you needed to get it going. And the idea was you buy it, you build it, and you shoot it. And it was done in very short order. But they went further and said that, oh, well, an incomplete frame, if it's sold with a jig, is also a gun. And so what happened was a gun rights group decided that it was going to facially challenge the rule, which already puts you at a disadvantage. And then the way this was brought was they kind of haphazardly plaintiff selected and didn't really assert individual, like, narrow reasons. It was, oh, this whole thing has to go. It's a facially invalid rulemaking, which means there's no set of circumstances under which any of this logic would have made sense. And then it was litigated again by very good lawyers who weren't super intimately familiar with how the stuff worked. And when you read the opinion that came down from the Supreme Court, it's very clear that a lot of the questions that they asked at oral argument made a big impact in the wording of the decision, because they kind of drilled into those areas where the litigants were uncomfortable with some of the questions that they were being asked. That is to say, I'm not sure any lawyer would have been able to steer this court away from this result with this case. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that because the way that Cooper Kirk litigated this is why we had a bad outcome. I'm saying the fact that this case was brought the way it was is what led to this outcome. Would you tend to agree, Evan?
I would. So for those of you who aren't extremely legally savvy and the opinion didn't make a ton of sense to you,
right? I
did a little summary here on Twitter that you can sort of read on the screen. But the gist of it, the thing that you need to understand is that what was really being challenged here, right? Because ATF was trying to ban these incomplete frames or receivers, and they were trying to use the Gun Control Act to do this. Mm-hmm. The Gun Control Act has language concerning what is and isn't a frame or receiver, but it's relatively vague. And I know a lot of people, because they understood that Chevron deference was more or less completely nuked by the courts, were very worried about, well, does ATF even have this power? Well, they do, because as in Chevron, the federal interpretation was something that a statute was actually silent to. Mm-hmm. The Gun Control Act talks about frames and receivers at pretty decent length, including things that can be converted to become frames and receivers. So certainly what the ATF was doing was in the heartland of what the Gun Control Act gives them the authority to interpret.
Well, hold on. So not quite, right? The problem is, and the reason they went under the Gun Control Act is that the only mention of frames and receivers we have is underneath firearms. They don't define frame receivers in the Gun Control Act, right? That was all regulatorily defined. But what they did define was weapons, right? And it does repeatedly define things that, well, not repeatedly, there's a part of the Gun Control Act that was concerned specifically with starter pistols that were being brought in chiefly from Italy. And what the deal with those guns was they were always guns. Like, they had rifled barrels, they were chambered in 22 short or 25 auto, and they were always guns. And then they would just put something in the barrel and be like, haha, it's a starter pistol, right? And those were imported in the countries as non-guns. And then you'd pull out the thing. Oftentimes it was just lead. You would heat up the barrel and melt the lead out, and then you'd have a gun. So they defined it as something which, which shoots a projectile or may readily be, and that's the only time we actually do have converted. People think it's in the machine gun definition, but it's not. Converted to shoot a projectile by the action of an explosive. That's all under the firearm definition as a whole. And so I think the reason the buy, build, shoot kit was such an important hook was that was where the Gun Control Act gave you this kind of open, more open area, was in that a firearm, right? Something that could be a complete weapon through ready conversion. But the frame or receiver thing was only a sub point of, a weapon, or the frame or receiver of such a weapon, but it always had to be a weapon. And that's why this case is, they talk about so much whether or not it's a weapon. So go on from there.
Right. So the like you were saying, the case did hinge heavily on whether or not something was a weapon. And the court asked two questions of the litigants. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think that the majority's opinion here is entirely convincing, because it isn't. Mm-hmm. There's a couple places where I'm like, well, there's no way that can possibly be true. But in order for the dissent's position, right, Thomas and Alito, I believe, both had dissents. In order for their positions to be true, a lot larger number of things that it's like, that doesn't make sense, like that doesn't add up, have to then be the case. So it's sort of like a less believable, or the more believable of two less unbelievable things,
right,
wins out in this case. Because for their weapon analysis, the two questions that they were asking, sort of really the more interesting question was, okay, consider a disassembled weapon. How long would it take you, right? A disassembled weapon, clearly, right, not ready to fire in its current state. And they didn't use this as an example, but the one that jumps to the front of my mind is a Winchester Model 40. Hilariously difficult to take apart and put back together shotgun. Takes me about an hour or two, and that's knowing how they come apart, right? An hour or two just to get it apart, an hour or two to put it back together. If you've got a disassembled Winchester Model 40, I'm not going to sit there, look you in the eye and say, this isn't a weapon.
Right.
Because it is, even if it's 2 hours away from working. Okay, so the court had asked that question of the two litigants, and the ATF is like, well, yes, a disassembled gun is a weapon. And the plaintiffs in this case were also, yes, a disassembled gun is a weapon. Well, that's not good for your case at this point, because you've said, okay, something 2 hours away from actually being capable of being employed as a weapon, because otherwise it's just a dumb club, right? In the case of the Winchester Model 40, it's a pretty fragile club at the end of the day. But you end up agreeing with them, okay, 2 hours away from shooting something is a weapon, because that's what it's meant to be, right? This conglomeration of parts, it's there for a purpose, and that purpose is to become a gun once it's put together. So there's that hook there. And Thomas would look at this and say, but look, there isn't a complete frame or receiver there. But a complete frame or receiver isn't actually necessary for something to be a weapon. And so you end up having a sort of parade of, I don't think that's entirely believable. So like, okay, let's say Thomas is right. An incomplete frame or receiver isn't a part of a weapon at all. Is it a protectable arm under Bruin then? And of course, this wasn't a Second Amendment case at all. But for Thomas to be correct, you sort of have to abandon any sort of arm protection for an unfinished frame or receiver automatically, which is it just sort of leads you down a goofy sideways, self-contradicting line of thought, which is unfortunate. But the example that the court had asked of a disassembled firearm was a really, really good question to ask, because it is pretty illustrative. And the second question they asked was again about the starter guns, where they say, okay, but if it takes somebody like an hour to put this back to being a firearm, the Gun Control Act already envisions this sort of thing being a firearm. Polymer
that's the one area where I just wish that there was people who really were familiar with guns and really familiar with the acts litigating this, because there is one distinction there, and it may be a distinction without a difference at the end of the day, because the court ultimately said that artifact nouns include things that are almost there, right? But with the the thing about a disassembled gun and the thing about the starter guns that they have in common is that they have already been weapons at some point.
Yes.
Right? Like the starter guns, which were not starter guns. They were 25 ACP pistols and 22 short revolvers that had their barrels plugged. That's all they were. At some point, that was a weapon, right? And then something was done to it to make it not very useful as a weapon. Same thing with your Model 40. Something was done to it to make it not very useful as a weapon. It's still a weapon, right? Now, it's just... It's kind of a metaphysical question, right? It has attained the weapon status, and now it cannot get rid of it. What does it take to get rid of it? And that's something we're going to talk about in a little bit as well. That's convincing to me, but then is that convincing? Would that be convincing to the court? I'm not sure. I think it is an important distinction between the two, but I do still believe that something is not a weapon until it is in such a condition as it can cast wrath against another. That does kind of fall apart, though, when you take it apart. The other thing that gets me here is if we're going to take that path, we do have to accept the obvious counterexample, which is going to be, okay, well, what if I make the whole thing and there's a little pull tab on the end, right? And the pull tab just prevents you from pulling the trigger, and I haven't taken the pull tab out. Is it a weapon yet? And it's really hard to look somebody straight in the face and say no, right?
And that was with the challenge that the plaintiffs brought. They have to answer that question. Yes, that's not a weapon, right? That there's no imperceptibly slight. That so long as there's a perceptible difference, right? So long as one thing has to be done before this thing is employable as a weapon, it's not a weapon. Yeah. And that's they never couch their argument in these terms, because obviously that's like on its face, right? On its face as a facial challenge, it's nonsense.
It has to have no application that is rational, and that's the problem. The way they brought that, I'm glad you brought that back up. The problem that I think you have with the way this case was brought by the organization that brought it is that they lack the foresight. When they brought this facial challenge, they had to say, no matter what, if there's any minute little scrap of work that needs to be done, it can't be considered this. And that is just very hard to have an argument to make.
It was a statutory line drawing challenge that they brought. Right. It's like, we say the ATF can't draw this line at all. This line doesn't exist even. What does, unfortunately, at least so far as the court has found.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I'm not sensitive to that argument, right? I am, but come on. Like, when you look at where we are with the Overton window, this was a stupid way to bring it.
And it's not terrible to have. Yeah. To do an all or nothing, right? Because it's a Hail Mary of a challenge.
Well, but you can do it if you also make a necessary element a specific application, where you challenge it facially, and then you also say, and this one we want declaratory relief that this one, right, is not right. This one,
because the challenge they're asking for is any perceptible thing that keeps it one step from being a weapon, even if that is like you have to brush a hair out of it so it can go into battery or whatever, right?
You have to scoop the peanut butter out.
Like saying that ATF doesn't have the ability to say that, like, oh, well, that's close enough, it's a firearm at that point. You can do that Hail Mary challenge, but you should probably also be bringing something saying that, well, we believe that's the case, but definitely if it takes you 30 minutes or an hour or whatever number you want to sit behind for a Pollen Rady, that clearly can't be then. That should be thrown in on top of it. And additionally, sort of the more grievous thing that happened in this case is we have a multitude of gun rights groups, probably hopefully in the chance that one of them will bring a challenge that's good. And unfortunately, we saw multiple of them hitch their wagons to this challenge after it seemed like it was on the path towards a preliminary injunction, and a bunch of gun rights groups and plaintiffs then wanted to like intervene and hitch themselves to it to sort of take advantage of that umbrella, and that really killed any momentum for an actual challenge to this. And so then it wanders its way up to the Supreme Court. And for me, the whole idea that there is a broader legal strategy amongst the gun rights groups and they have this all master planned was shattered for me years and years ago. Yeah. But this is certainly a very indicative case of I think on the broader scale, nobody knows what they're doing, because this wasn't a good case to have be the one that gets sort of rocket docketed to the Supreme Court, because it was never a very good challenge. And so far as I'm aware, there wasn't a good second challenge where it was like,
there weren't any.
Takes an hour.
Nobody sat there and said, mine, this one, right? That would have cured this whole thing, because if part of this was this one, right? You can't call this one a gun.
Or, right, if you're going to do a Hail Mary, here's a more interesting Hail Mary. My client thinks that they have a Second Amendment right in making a gun on their own, and they want it to be this easy. Right. Because the Second Amendment doesn't say unless it's done in 30 minutes or unless it's done in an hour.
Which, by the way, everybody, that is not foreclosed. That challenge can still be brought.
Yes.
But now the hill is way steeper, right? But so let's run down the key takeaways, right? You see, bad things, all-in-one kits, they're guns, right? Buy, build, shoot, it's a gun now. No. Sorry, let me be very, very clear, because there's enough misinformation about this. The Supreme Court has the power to say they're guns. That's where we're at right now. 2, P80 frames and things that are identical, right? So, and was there a test? No, they did not articulate a test. They did not declare a bright line rule. What they kind of indicated was stuff that takes somebody with no skill, with simple hand and power tools, less than an hour. That's the stuff that's within the realm of possibility for the ATF to possibly call a gun. And again, they retained the rule endorsed ability to come up with these, to engage in line drawing on where a gun is and is not. Go on, yeah.
The two things I wanted to add is on our list of bad things, that's going forward, right? So if you have a Polymer 80 that doesn't have a serial number currently, so long as your state law is not weird about that, you can continue to have it, and that's fine. Don't have to worry about that at all. And the second caveat I want to add is that immediately after ATF passed this rule, they immediately launched into the hilarious line drawing nonsense where they're like, well, this configuration of AR-15 80% receiver is a firearm, but it's been sold this way, it might not be. But then maybe if a jig or template comes available at some point in time, then maybe the 80% AR-15 lowers that we know today would become firearms. Who knows? Could be anything. And then they had another one of these letters I think they had done for AKs. And then they did another one of these things for Polymer 80s where the ATF at that point had said Polymer 80 frames are okay. Polymer 80 frames are not okay. They need a little bit more plastic here and a little bit more plastic here, and then there probably are okay.
And that's where the bridge frame came from.
Right, which is like a head scratcher where it's like ATF is like, no, do your Polymer 80s like this, and then they're fine. And it's like, whose team are you playing for? This isn't the ATF we know and love. The ATF we know and love would never be so clear as to say we like this.
Right. Yep. So it's pretty good. And then why don't you give us the things that are under good things?
Right. And the things that I had listed as good things is that, of course, this has no bearing on your ability to make guns yourself, right? You can continue to make guns. You don't have to start putting serial numbers on all the Polymer 80s that you currently have that you didn't finish, right? It's just perspective, right? Going forward, and specifically for things that are going to be in commerce, right? So manufacturers, dealers, whatever these selling these things at this point would start needing those numbers. Ghost guns as a whole at the federal level are not banned. I know I've seen about 100 different mainstream news headlines that are like Supreme Court upholds ghost gun ban. Ghost guns aren't banned, right? It's all sort of flavor text, really. The actual holding of this is very, very narrow, and it's basically that the ATF's rule gets to exist, at least for now.
And the ATF gets to engage in line drawing.
Right. The ATF has the ability to line draw under the Gun Control Act.
Right.
Next thing I had there on the list is that AR-15 80% are unaffected for now. ATF said that, and that is in the Federal Register for now. AR-15 80% receivers are okay. However, this rule, while it did put in the Federal Register, AR-15 receivers and AK flats and similar things are okay, ATF has given itself the power to change its mind on that at any time. I don't think that the current ATF would do that, but a future ATF could do that. And the things that ATF is allowed to look at, right? That's perhaps the most pernicious thing about this rule was that ATF is allowed to look at jigs, templates, instructions online, essentially the whole universe of information and details and tools and capabilities on finishing 80% receivers. But they're allowed to look at those things as they exist in the now. So what used to be an okay 80% receiver might not be okay if somebody invents the turns an AR-15 80% into a complete firearm in 15-minute inator, and it costs $10, and you actually trade your like box stamps in for it. And then you have your AR-15 make-inator. ATF would say, okay, 80% AR lowers, those are firearms now, which is kind of a ridiculous thing. And I think we talked about it before. It's like the idea of a four-dimensional firearm. It's like a 4D gun.
Yes.
Eventually at some point in the future, this is going to become a firearm, and not because anything changed about it. It's because something changed about something else.
Something changed in the universe of information,
which certainly has all sorts of weird and interesting questions that raises about the, like, I don't know that any other executive rule, probably the EPA has this on something, but I don't know that any other executive branch has given themselves the power to be like, we actually are the wardens of time now. Across time and space, we will tell you what isn't okay, what isn't okay to have. But certainly that challenge may come later, because again, another good thing that I didn't write here is that, of course, the challenge here didn't foreclose future challenges to this rule at all. There's a whole universe of other challenges that could be brought, and the court even identified this.
Right.
But then sort of the final thing that I outlined as being a good thing is that during the deliberation about this case, DOJ was consistently pointing to a prior court case that had dealt with M14s, where they had said that, 8 hours in a fully equipped machine shop, right? If in 8 hours in a fully equipped machine shop, someone could convert something to be a machine gun, well, that means that it was designed and intended to be a machine gun, which is like a hilariously, ridiculously stupid thing for a court to have ever found, right? And is a result of, I'm going to be presumptive here, it's a result of the lawyers in the case that were on the side of gun rights didn't know guns very well, because they didn't know that was like, hey, that's kind of fucking stupid, because you could make it from scratch in 8 hours in a fully equipped machine shop. This is how machine shop
we have.
Right. But the Supreme Court did not pick up on that, despite the fact that they had the opportunity to. And while they didn't outline a test, right, they did point to this 1 hour, an unskilled person, and the examples of unskilled they gave is like they haven't used these tools before, so they really don't know what they're doing. So 1 hour unskilled with power tools available to them. And power tools is very markedly different from actual machinery. So not mills, lathes, power tools is like drills, maybe saws. Routers. Well,
they're staring right at the P80. That's what they're staring at, right?
They're describing the polymer 80.
Yeah. So that's what they were thinking of. How, and we'll talk about two applications where this is concerning. I'm sure you can guess. We're going to talk about how does this apply? Does this apply to the Adamiak and the Matthew Hoover cases? And I guess I'll give away the end of the anime. I don't think it really hurts. I'm not sure if it helps, but we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, the court had the opportunity to say it could be anything, right? And the court had the opportunity to entertain. They had the opportunity to go much further, but they kind of set goalposts. And this is something, it's dicta, but we'll be using it to suggest that you don't get to just say anything is a gun, right? So it was a bad decision, but it's a bad decision that could have been worse, right? That's what I'll say.
The surprising thing for me is that without any concurrences or without any trying to say, well, we don't actually feel this way, all of the progressive justices signed on to the majority opinion, and in the majority opinion, it took the hilariously confusing position of, because one of the best points that I think plaintiffs brought up is the fact that when we talk about conversion, of course, the machine gun definition doesn't have conversion, but it does have still restored, and it does have designed to. And there was a lot of discussion about whether or not polymer 80 was designed to be a weapon. Of course, the design to be a weapon isn't actually part of the firearm definition, which is like a whole other ball of worms and a whole red herring, really. But the designed to language, when you look at an AR-15, well, it doesn't take 8 hours in a machine shop. And in fact, 1 hour unskilled with power tools, you can get there pretty easily, especially if you're allowed to have multiple attempts in that 1 hour. You can totally get there. But the Supreme Court, after having that raised in an amicus brief, and then I believe touching on it in oral arguments even, the Supreme Court dismissed that because ATF promised it's never been their position that AR-15s can be converted to machine guns readily, which is ridiculous because, yes, it has been. And in fact, they've maintained this multiple times, and they've put people in jail based on this very idea, which is just beyond stupid for the court to like hand wave that away. But then hilariously, the progressive justices still sign on to this.
Right.
Like this pandering the Supreme Court does to say, well, AR-15s clear, they're very common and clearly they aren't machine guns because ATF says they're not. Which is like, and until it suits ATF to say they is, but that's not a big deal. I wouldn't worry about that. And that for me was like the biggest chain of consciousness break, where it was like, okay, I don't agree with what they're saying. I don't like what they're saying, but it does at least make sense. And then I get to that and I'm like, you just hand waved that shit really, really hard.
Right. So, yep. So we're going to continue now with the parade of horribles, though, because one thing that was concerning was within 24 hours of the opinion coming down, Trump's DOJ, and I'm putting the onus on baby here because it was way too snappy, filed this in the Adamiak case, which, as you guys know, Adamiak is at the time he was a 20-something-year-old Navy sailor, a master sergeant who collected gun parts, who had parts kits and a bunch of deactivated crap. A criminal informant for the ATF. ATF basically said, find us somebody who's illegally selling machine guns on Gunbroker or you're going to prison. And so he naturally couldn't find this, and he found somebody who was selling cut up parts kits and said, that's the guy who's selling machine guns, and this is enough for ATF to raid the guy's house and destroy his life. That case is on appeal, and within 24 hours, they came in saying that, Vanderstock actually supports keeping this guy in prison for 2 decades. And basically the argument that was made by the assistant U.S. attorney here is that, well, the case was about whether or not something is a weapon. And obviously these cut-off parts kits were weapons. I don't think that's the case. And on top of that, I don't think you get to import from a facial challenge to an administrative rulemaking binding law for a criminal, application in a felony context,
especially whenever the facts are pretty disparate between like this. This is drill some holes in it and it's done, in comparison to even if we adopt the court's 1 hour unskilled person. I've got some skills. I'm not a great welder, but I know how it works. I'm not, regardless of how it's cut up, I'm not doing that in under an hour. It would not be easy at all to actually get it to the point that it actually works.
So let me read to you this paragraph from this AUSA. Weapon is an artifact noun characterized by an intended function rather than some ineffable natural essence. A parts kit is a weapon because it comes with all necessary components and its intended function as an instrument of combat is obvious. Further, if Congress had wanted to regulate only operable firearms, it could have simply addressed weapons that can expel a projectile. Instead, by providing that a weapon also qualified, blah, 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 designed to accomplish that function or capable of being readily converted to do so, Congress necessarily contemplated that some things short of fully operable firearms qualify as weapons. This is a manic interpretation because the position they're saying is that anything that
every parts kit
is a weapon because it comes with all the parts. Even and here we have the problem where it is like, this is a thing that we can all agree that a parts kit was once a weapon and now it's not. So, like, it was destroyed. So this isn't the question of, is there one thing that needs to be removed? This is the question of, you had your Winchester Model 40 and I ran over it with a truck. Is it still a weapon? And then cut it
the backbone of the gun into multiple pieces. Like, okay, if you walked over to it, right? So for perhaps a more gory example, if you walked over to a person and removed a couple of vertebrae without anesthesia, are they still a complete person? Probably not.
Well, I mean, a person, we have a much more, nuanced understanding there. But a car, right? And this is something I actually brought up in our brief in this case. If I say I have a complete car here and you come and everything's there, but it's just sawed 40% of like down the long wise, are you right to be mad? The way I described this, it's there.
Right. And car. As far as investigation of artifact nouns, I think the way the Supreme Court spells out how artifact nouns may include polymer 80s, I think necessarily it must disinclude, like, because they talked about the fact that it's like, you say I own a 69 Ford Mustang or whatever, right? But you don't actually have it complete. It's just most of you've got all the parts around. It's a project car. You're just working on putting it back together. If you say, I've got a 69 Ford Mustang, or more applicable to this case directly, I am selling a 69 Ford Mustang. And then what you actually buy is like a tube frame that's not welded together. And it could be welded together into a number of different cars in actuality. And it could probably be welded together wrong by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. And it's pretty far away from being able to roll down the road at all. I don't think that you've actually sold someone a car. As far as the capture of artifact nouns, I think we're now well outside the heartland of this is a 69 Ford. And you look at it and go, it's a cut up piece of crap.
Right. Yeah. And then the other question is Hoover. Is this really going to affect Hoover's case? I don't think so. It's a completely different part. It's like completely different part of the statute. But I do think that we get to point. So in the Adamiak case, we get to point and say, the court said in that, and again, where the stakes were much lower, right? The court said it had to be an unskilled person with 1 hour. That ain't TIG welding, baby. Like, I'm sorry. It just ain't. With Hoover, all of the evidence at trial showed that nobody could make the damn thing,
including a guy with a fully equipped machine shop.
Yeah, who tried multiple times. It was only when the ATF did it, and he was just doing his own thing.
Multiple times exceeding this 1 hour window by far and away in terms of the sum of all of his attempts.
Right.
And even then, he doesn't get it to work correctly.
Right. And so these are things that'll be brought up in these cases. But so do I think these hurt the cases? No. It's the fact is that a win in this case would have had the opportunity of knocking it out of the park for both of those guys, because then you'd be able to say, if it's not allowed at all in that context, how can it be allowed in this context? The loss in this case doesn't kill those cases, though. It doesn't really hurt them either. It just doesn't win it for them. So now they still have to be won on their own merits, which include a lot of problems, some of which are made obvious from the government's 28J letter, because they're like, at the end of it, they're trying to say, serious, it's obvious we won because it could have been any one of these multiple things, and we didn't charge any of them specifically, by the way. And that's why you should uphold. So,
yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in the Adamiak case, at trial and the transcripts, you can see there was never any evidence presented as far as, we completed these things in this amount of time. Like, no, they didn't actually put any of the shit back together. They just said that they just rely on an expert saying, like, I can totally do that.
It was and it was the informant who said in the beginning of the trial, he said in a few hours he could get it done, and at the end of the trial, it was 5 minutes.
It's like getting Uncle Rico in there to be like, I could throw a football over those mountains. It's like, no, you fucking can't.
Right, and that was so. Yeah, they never tried to put the PBSH together. The RPGs, how they tested these was they took them, completely disassembled them, got all of the fire control components from a Russian RPG that was in ATF's possession, put the fire control components into this one that still had the holes in it that would remove your head, and they admitted it would remove your head. And then they put a training rocket, which is literally its own firearm, in it, and got the training thing to go off.
Like they put a sub insert in it. Like
they put the 7.6.39 insert.
Right, they put a rifle inside of the RPG and was like, wow, this RPG works.
That's what they did. And then the grenade launchers, they assembled them themselves. There was no argument. There was it was uncontested that the grenade launchers were in legal configurations when they got them, and then they were like, woo, 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 and then made them into unregistered grenade launchers. You are allowed to buy 40 millimeter receivers. You're allowed to buy 40 millimeter barrels.
Just can't put them together.
Yeah, and they were stored on opposite ends of the property, and the receivers, by the way, had dummy barrels on them. So it's just like Thompson Center at that point, where there is a legal possibility. There is a legal way of having this together, so you can't be charged.
I always get reminded when we're talking about that RPG, I get reminded of that meme where it's like, pick a guy needing to project his voice over a long distance, thought quickly and grabbed a squirrel, tape, string, and a megaphone, was able to construct a device capable of projecting his voice over long distances. Like, okay, yeah, sure, bud, that RPG was so live.
Right. Then we also saw we had a lot of movement on Twitter, though, for the Adamiak situation, and I thank God for that. I thank God for everybody on Twitter who is helping to amplify the signal here. One of our friends at National Gun Rights called on POTUS to pardon Mr. Adamiak immediately. And I'm, 500,000 views, 100,000 on my post. We got a lot of views. Mr. Guns and Gear put it out. So I'm glad that this is getting the attention that deserves. Tate does not deserve to be in jail. He's a good guy. This, I will say, the thing that really is hurtful is that this Vanderstock ruling really broke these guys' hearts, like really, really hurt their spirits because they were stoked on them. But National Gun Rights, we call on POTUS to pardon Mr. Adamiak immediately. Patrick Tate Adamiak, a serviceman in the Navy and a patriot, serving 20 years in prison for possessing a cut-up World War II parts kits and non-functional historical curios. Why? ATF HQ told a criminal informant, find someone selling machine guns or you're going to jail. Out of desperation, that informant pointed to Tate's cut-up parts. On this alone, 40-plus federal agents raided his home over dummies and scrap metal, seizing all of his assets as proceeds of illegal activity, which is true. Vanderstock may have been upheld, but the ruling was a permission, not a mandate. The Justice Department should withdraw the ghost gun rule immediately, as it is being used to create terrible situations such as this. And I think that was pretty well said. We'll just also say no gun rights groups ever came to help in any of these criminal cases. I'd just be remiss not to bring that up.
I tend to concur. It is an unfortunate situation that I guess this continues to happen. This has happened for a long time. This will probably never stop happening. Maybe that's too doomer, but it's certainly no less. It's certainly no excuse, I should say, to not say something about it every time that it happens. Because at the end of the day, right? If we are to try and give people the benefit of the doubt, as hard as that is to do for the government sometimes. Mm-hmm. There are true believers in the government that can't tell the difference between somebody who's actually out to cause harm and do bad things and give ne'er-do-wells machine guns and somebody who's like a collector of parts kits. Because I'm sure the gun builders among us will understand. Mm-hmm. There is a thing where you buy parts kits for machine guns or whatever. It doesn't even have to be machine guns. You buy parts kits that you're like, oh, I'll build that one day, and it sits there.
Yep.
I've got an AUG kit and a Galil kit, right? They've sat there for like 5 years. They're dust collectors at this point. There's dead spiders in the boxes. That's what they're there for at this point. Probably never build them, but you get them anyway just because it's sort of cool and it's nice to have the parts and look at them. But perhaps on a much broader scale, much higher level, right? There's an education mission to be done here from the broader gun advocacy community to make it more clear to the government there's nothing malicious with having parts with which, with a ton of effort in manufacture of new components and material alteration, could eventually become a machine gun for a licensed person or for a person that wasn't licensed, that was interested in breaking the law the way it stands now. Mm-hmm. And that there's nothing wrong with having the parts or being one step away from there, right? Because if anything, right, even if this person working at the government doesn't want to accept that, the Supreme Court's told them that they have to, right? Because if we're to extend Thompson to parts kits, which is it's just bizarre that we even have to do this because it's like not a complete gun at all.
Well, yeah, and it became a parts kit for a reason. It was so that we wouldn't have to deal with this, and yet here we are.
Exactly. Like there is a plausible legal configuration of a cut up bunch of parts that are not a firearm and are hours and hours of skilled, meticulous carrying labor away from being a firearm. The legal configuration is they're already that, right? They're already that. Yeah. There's nothing needs to change, right? They're already in their legal configuration, cut into shreds.
Yep. And also, who cares? Like, who cares about parts? Who cares?
Is there a lot of big, like they've solved all of the gun crime in the country, so now they're at the real root of the problem. Criminals welding up World War II era submachine guns.
That's 100% happening.
Stupid. It's just fucking stupid.
Yeah, it's retarded.
Like what gets like one get recover a year that's from that? Like maybe two.
I doubt one. I doubt it. But
they've solved Glock switches already, so they're ready to focus on the real threat. It's the PPSH 41s.
Let's talk about something that's not retarded. VZGrips.com, guys. It's VZGrips.com, one of our longest supporters, a great Florida business. And if you use promotional code this week 15, you'll get 15% off of your order. They have really good grips. The new VZ Operator 4 full-size 1911 grips. They kind of look like flames. They are a flamer grip. They got the sharps. They got more 1911 grips still. M-Lock rail covers and hand stops. These are actually pretty sick. If you want to really Gucci up your little Geisler there, check these out and don't forget to use promotional code. It's actually pretty affordable, like $20 for a really nice piece of G10 machined to be a supreme grippler. Give it a look. Why not try it out? VZGrips.com, and don't forget to use promotional code this week 15. So yeah, next up, I like so yeah, of course we've been talking about him, Bondi, a decent bit. And Ivan has titled this story Woman Sends Mixed Signals, Big News Edition. Why don't you pull it away?
So this case deals with, if you guys remember, we talked about it some time ago, Trump's big Second Amendment executive order where the government was to reevaluate its positions on existing interpretations of policies and what it thinks is worthwhile actions. And another part of this was to investigate, ongoing at state or local level violations of Americans' Second Amendment rights, which I figured would just sort of be I figured if any part of it was going to be a complete nothing burger, it was going to be that, where it's like, there's no way the federal government goes and sues state or locality governments over Second Amendment rights denial. There's no way, and then they went and did it. It did actually happen. And Pam Bondi in her press release, she is a charismatic person, for as ineffectual as people want to say. She's really good at giving speeches, and then nothing happens.
Right.
She had some very unpleasant things to say about Los Angeles County, and then said that this is just the start. All y'all better get your acts together, which I thought was okay. It's not quite giving me goosebumps, but okay, perhaps not coming to fuck around, right? They have the unlimited wallet of the United States federal government, and they're just here to smack peepees for a while. Frankly, I don't hate seeing the government used in this way, and I know, right? I can already hear it. I can already hear the neoconservative bleeding, where it's like, well, you don't want the Democrats to use the government to do this. They've been doing it for the past 20 years.
They literally have never stopped.
They have picked up the hammer every time and just smacked people with it. It's okay. It's okay to have there was a big war that did happen about the question of if the federal government can smack people with the hammer, if it can smack the states with the hammer, if it disagrees with them. Regardless of how you feel about the particular conflict or its belligerence, the outcome of this was the hammer exists and can be used to smack states with. And so we might as well have that used to protect the rights that we care about, like perhaps the Second Amendment. And so I sure hope that Los Angeles gets smacked pretty hard.
No, I agree. And I think that will be, if nothing else, funny. So we will keep it. Yeah. So they're doing an investigation, and what this will most likely result in is a lawsuit, which will be funny. So.
And I suppose one other thing that I did want to add is that supposedly, maybe I don't know if this has been 100% confirmed yet, but in a bunch of criminal suppressor cases, so previously we had seen right in the wake of Trump's executive order, the Department of Justice had asked for a pause on all Second Amendment related litigation. And so everything that had to do with pistol braces, and I think also cases that had to do with bump stocks, but I may be misremembering that, a bunch of cases that had to do with a bunch of gun related stuff, all had the Department of Justice ask for a pause, which is silly because they don't need a pause. What they need is just, if they think they're wrong, just fuck off, right? That's not, it's like a coin flip. It doesn't take you that long to figure it out because they're asking for rather extended pauses. But from what I understand, they're now asking for a similar pause in criminal cases regarding possession of suppressors. And so
that's interesting.
Now, in an ideal world, right, when it comes to prosecutorial discretion, it would be really cool if, at the very least, just for the next couple of years, we have a Department of Justice that doesn't waste a hilarious amount of resources trying to fuck with people for simple possession of unregistered NFA stuff, because it shouldn't be illegal in the first place, and they really shouldn't be wasting government resources on nonviolent crimes in the first place. Right. Especially if the whole mantra, the whole marching order of this current administration is there's too many violent people in the country and we have to get them out. And so it doesn't make sense for you then to find the nonviolent people and throw them in jail for having a gun to defend themselves.
Right. Yep. I 100% agree. So we will see how this goes. What's your prediction? My prediction is we see one lawsuit happen and then no change.
Even one would be okay. I know CRPA was sort of the it was CRPA like calling foul on Los Angeles that sort of led to this happening. Yeah,
Costas Moras, he willed this into existence.
Yes, by being shitty about it on Twitter, it's actually amazing.
Yeah,
but it's he should be shitty about more stuff. See if he can't. Perhaps Pam Bondi is a big fan of his or something. Who knows?
Yeah, he needs to also get rid of his electric car.
Yeah, what the fuck?
That's really. I'm sorry, Costas. I love you. You're a great guy, but that post really.
You can't take the California out of he's a Californian and he's got the electric car.
You should just beat him up.
But my prediction, one locality is eventually getting sued. If it could be a whole state that gets sued, that would be awesome. If it could be a plurality of states that get sued, that would be cool.
But which do you think is going to happen? One and done, or are we going to see more than one?
One and done, but I bet it's not going to be Los Angeles.
Really? Okay.
It's a misdirection. They're going to investigate Los Angeles. In the course of their investigation, they're going to sue somebody else, and Los Angeles is going to go, sorry, please don't hurt us.
We'll see. You know what would be really funny is what they did with Sue New York. It would be really funny.
That would be really, really funny. It's like, hey, Bruin was about you, idiot.
We'll see you in court. We'll see you in court. That was funny. All right. Well, you know what else is good, guys? It is MAF Corporation, guys. Be sure to go to maf-arms.com and check out MAF Corp. Check out all of the sales, all of the different cool stuff. Whoa, there's parts kits. Oh, no. Right?
Oh, no.
Don't worry. It doesn't come with any reservoirs, but check it out. It's beautiful, beautiful Bulgarian Bakelite kit. Very beautiful, very gorgeous Bakelite. And there's all kinds of different stuff available for sale on there. Look at that. The Sunshine G17/G19 Builders Combo Meal. Everything a growing boy needs.
Everything a glowing boy needs.
Yeah, no, the glowing boy needs one more part, I think. But yeah, for a very low price. So guys, go on there and use promotional code FUDBusters to give me the score, or use promotional code RATMAN to support your Ratman Ivan. That's maf-arms.com, promotional code FUDBusters or RATMAN.
You want to know a thought I just had is that ammo's getting cheap again, and that here hopefully the Asian European people will stop shooting at each other, and that eventually everything will get normal over there once more, and that their flavor of their ethnicity of ammo will start to get cheap again too, because wait,
are the Finns shooting at each other? Those are the Asian European people, right? The anime people.
Yeah, definitely. My secret hope is that we have a Trump slump 2 happen, and I think it'll end up happening. But if 7.62x39 could hurry up and get affordable again, I'm ready for the AK man to be back on top, because eventually, right? Looking, and it's the milled AK parts kits every time. Like I sit there and look at it, and it's like, man, that would be really nice. And as soon as, and really the time to get the kits is now, because the ammo will then come down in price later, and then the price on kits will go back up, because of course it will. People are always stuck having one of the two of them be expensive. Only the past couple of years it's been both, which is unfortunate, because I guess then again, there was a time known as the 1990s where the movies came on video cassettes. And during this time, the guns and the ammo were like 2 quarters and a stick of bubble gum.
And boomers were still saying it was too much.
Yeah, they were still complaining.
Yeah.
The good times.
When a Wasser was 2 digits and they're like, I'm not spending that.
$95 for this communist hunky junk.
But honestly, the mill, obviously I'm biased, but the price on that Hungarian milled all Bakelite,
especially because the Hungarian, of the milled kits, the Hungarian ones are really out there.
Really nice.
They did not make very many of them,
especially not the bakes, right? Like, so you have a lot more of the AK-50s, the 1950 pattern ones, which were just a normal plain Jane Type 3, where these are a Type 3 with a little panache.
Right.
Next up, we have Colorado, and this was interesting because, man, we've been talking about the Colorado gas-operated bill for a long time because of how stupid it is. And actually, we had a little something to do with it this time. Unfortunately, it passed. It passed was it the House or the
it passed the House and then the Senate, and we listened to the Senate deliberations. Yep. And it made me wish that guns were banned entirely because I really wish I could have done anything but continue to listen to them. And that leads your mind to dark places.
Yeah. And so it's basically, we've talked about this 100 times, the way it defines gas operated, right? And so what they're doing with this gas operated semi-automatic handgun bill is originally this was designed to target like AR pistols, right? And AR and AK pistols and that sort of thing. But then they kept expanding it.
Right. So I believe it started as a feature test very first initially, or maybe like the last session. It was a feature test meant to do the same thing.
Right.
But it kept getting expanded and adapted. And then Polis said he wouldn't sign it if it was an outright ban this time around. So the Democrats in Colorado had to try and soften the language to make it so it's more like a permit to purchase system that's got a pretty heavy fee, or maybe it was like eventually like a not set fee and a shifting fee, and the training requirements could maybe shift or be reevaluated every year, and hunters have to train less, but concealed carry people originally not going to have to do it at all, but then actually they did. A lot of amendments went back and forth on this thing as it was coming along, but eventually in its current form, it was meant to sort of ban what federally would sometimes be called large format pistols, but it didn't actually accomplish that.
Right. And so let's read the definition here. And again, ban, like not quite ban, but make really annoying, right? So, or wait, no, with these, it does ban the pistols, right? You can't transfer them, period.
This has been revised so many times that I'm not.
When I read it
one way or the other,
when I read it, it was not a possessory ban, but a transfer, and it prohibited the transfer specifically of these handguns. Like basically you're only allowed to get rid of it or receive it by succession. So let's look at this. Gas operated semi-automatic handgun means a semi-automatic handgun, and follow along, class, and try to use your brain to follow along. Semi-automatic handgun that harnesses or traps a portion of the high-pressure gas from a fired cartridge to cycle the action using any of the following. Number 1, a long-stroke piston system in which gas is vented from the barrel to a piston that is mechanically fixed to the bolt group and moves to cycle the action. Let's stop and talk about that. So there's the first thing you think of, right? Which is the thing that immediately comes to mind. You think of an AK, right?
Yep.
But then you start actually looking at those words and you start to think of more things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you start to wonder what these words are. And I want you guys to think about the word piston when we go through all of these. And just think about what a piston is. All right? So then
it's not otherwise defined anywhere in the bill.
It's not otherwise defined. So number 2, a semi-automatic pistol that uses a short stroke piston system in which gas is vented from the barrel to a piston that moves separately from the bolt group so that the energy is imparted through a gas piston to cycle the action. Right on its face, that's not immediately clear.
Yep.
But you're seeing short stroke piston, and so you think of one.
Right, an amateurish understanding of firearms will say, "Oh, well, they're describing an SKS or an FAL or a similar sort of firearm." A legal plus gun autism level of understanding will go through this and go, "Huh."
Right. What did you say? Huh?
It's a blowback handgun.
Right. And we'll explain why in a second. 3, a system that, and if you have gun autism, this is going to get you going. A system that traps and vents gas from either the barrel or the chamber to directly strike or impinge the bolt carrier, or slide assembly to unlock and cycle the action.
I'm not sure what the fuck that's actually meant to try and grab there. Because it's got elements of describing a gas trap system.
Yep.
It's got elements of trying to describe a gas delay system.
And a floating chamber.
Right, but the thing that it's the amateurish understanding, what they're trying to describe is the AR-15.
Yep.
But the AR-15 does not trap and vent gas.
Right. It's
like trap and vent being conjugated there, them having to be together sort of limits you to systems that have an automatic gas cutoff system that seals a fixed volume of gas into the operating parts, sort of like the M14. Only the M14 doesn't work this way because the M14 would be better described by either 1 or 2, depending on how exactly you wanted to look at
it. Yeah. So then 4 is just a hybrid of any of the things that came before. And then 5, a blowback operated system that directly utilizes the expanding gases of the ignited propellant powder acting on the cartridge case to drive the breech block or breech bolt rearward. And I know what you're thinking at first. At first, you're thinking, oh, it's just regular blowback. But is that what it says? Is that what it says? Right? This includes anything that depends on breech face pressure, which, by the way, is most handguns.
Yes.
And then they try to exempt things. So that further down, there's an exemption that says, well, this is not, not included is a semi-automatic handgun that uses recoil energy to cycle the action. What is that?
Yeah, well, what does recoil to cycle the action mean? When we think of a recoil-operated firearm, that usually neuron activates and we're like, oh, short recoil and long recoil.
Right.
But what's actually cycling the action in a short recoil or long recoil firearm? It's not the recoil of the gun.
No.
It is pressure on the bolt face.
On the bolt face. And that pressure on the bolt face is imparted through a cartridge case. And what shape is the cartridge case? The cylinder, which is acting upon fluid pressure. It's a fucking piston.
Yep.
So, like, this is actually a long conversation we had, and it wound up being in Complete Colorado, a op-ed by me and Dave Kopel, where basically we explain, you might think that this is a nothing burger, but the way this law is drafted, it gives the power to the treasurer in the state to decide what things are covered. And it's pretty clear the way this is drafted that it would cover every single semi-automatic center fire handgun except the Benelli B76 to B82.
Yep.
The Benelli B76 to B82 is unambiguously not covered by this handgun, by this prohibition, because you can know that the Benelli B76 is not piston operated, because if you put it in a vise and fire it, it will not cycle. But if you put a Glock in a vise so that the gun cannot move, there is no recoil from the frame of reference of a shooter, right? it will still work. It will actually work fantastic because it actually functions on pressure on the bolt face from the piston, the removable piston, the removable single-use piston,
the self-ejecting piston. Even.
Yeah. So this is stupid. This is really, really bad. It's hilariously overbroadly written.
It's simultaneously overbroad and unusably vague.
Yeah.
Where what does any of this mean? I don't know. Like, again, at first blush, as an amateurish reader, you can read through this and go, "Oh, this long stroke piston means like AK."
Yeah,
short stroke.
The thing that I colloquially say as that, right?
Right. Short stroke piston means FAL and SKS. Well, their definition of short stroke piston is also most, if not all, blowback firearms.
Right.
They then talk about
including
like hybrid
blowback
systems. The hybrid systems is bad. 3 is bad. And if you go back to 5, just I read it backwards just now, and I think I noticed something else. If you can pull 5 back up. Okay, so I read this backwards, and I had a brain blast. See if you're picking up what I'm throwing down. It talks about a blowback operated system. What does that mean? Who knows? That directly utilizes the expanding gases of ignited propellant powder acting on the cartridge case. They're talking about the gas is acting on the cartridge case.
Oh,
but the gas.
This is everything. This is everything. This is everything. Yeah. It's just everything, because the cartridge case is the rear seal. It has to be acting on it to drive the breech block or breech bolt, which could be connected by an intermediary or not.
Right, because it's talking about utilizes the expanding gases of the ignited powder propellant acting on the cartridge case. It's completely ambiguous as to if it's the cartridge case that drives the breech bolt forward. Maybe you could read it that way, but it's also entirely possible to read it that the expanding gases are driving the breech or breech bolt rearward, which describes every single gas operated or recoil operated or any other sort of operated firearm you can imagine.
Yeah, and the word directly, mind, does not help, because guns do not incidentally,
right? Like you maybe you have one that's like not directly, and it's like the Volkssturmgewehr.
Yeah,
it's got like a gas brake system,
right? Yeah,
maybe.
but it's still directly using it.
It is right. It is still like I don't know how you indirectly.
The indirect usage is the retard. The direct usage is the cycling.
Right.
And to drive it back rearward, we're not talking about the retardation, because we actually talked a lot when we were debating this. Is what happens when you have two nerds just getting into it. When we were debating this, we talked a lot about gas retarded actions. I don't even know why we were talking about it, because it's only rearward motion that matters.
Right.
So yeah, the law covers every way of. And see, this is what happens when you try to get clever. When you're not clever,
right? And the reason the Democrats are doing this is because they didn't expect that gun people would get clever around the time of the original '94 federal assault weapons ban,
right?
Or even California's original. It sort of targeted the features of militarily, or really not even just militarily, but self-defense useful firearms, right? The firearms that are most effective at killing people quickly are like,
or as I like to call them, useful firearms.
Right, useful, the non-shitty ones. Yeah. Like it's the sort of guns that do their job well, and the guns that you want for self-defense have a very particular job, and it makes some people uncomfortable to say it, but I'll say it: it's killing people. That's what they're there for. It's not, self-defense is not supposed to be like a fencing match where you're there on equal footing and on guard and all this shit. You're just supposed to blow them away, hopefully quickly and decisively, and without it being very difficult for you. And hopefully you won't even have to live with mental consequences for it, because it should just be so quick and easy. It should be painless. But people will be uncomfortable embracing that, and it warps the brain. It hurts my head.
No, it's because we're not comfortable dealing with, like, everyone is willing to accept the intense risks that you take when you get into a fucking automobile, when you get your soft, squishy blood bag into this 4,000-pound piece of steel, and you go out on the road with God and everyone else not paying attention to what the hell they're doing. There's a hilarious risk. But guess what? We accept the inherent utility thereof. Firearms are the same way. They just kind of work in the opposite way. If you accept that you are in a dangerous world and you are a soft, delicious little bag of blood, you may want an option to turn a bad meaning bag of blood into a empty bag, right? That is not harmful to you, right? You wear a gun, you own a gun, you keep a gun in case something bad happens. That's what it's for. It's right. Except for 22s and shotguns. Shotguns are for fun.
Yeah. And people got uncomfortable about this fact. I mean, that's what those initial assault weapons bans were meant to do, is like find the guns that are most useful for that and say, well, they all sort of have this in common. We'll ban that one feature because that's easier than trying to do anything else. But the problem is those features can be taken off or modified, or a pistol grip becomes a thumbhole stock, or any number of other like not touching you games can be played. So they figured that, okay, what we'll actually try and do is ban semi-automatic actions by using words that will be very hard for the court to rationalize, right? Because of course, a ban on semi-automatics even in the Ninth Circuit, I don't think it would fly. That said, California's in another story we have coming up, California's lawyer was refused to say that a flat semi-automatic ban would violate the Second Amendment, which was just great. It's a very serious member of the state bar there who takes his job seriously. But and so these bans are just trying to be that Second Amendment ban while making it so that the circuits that are going to be analyzing these cases will have some ability to do a Bruin analysis, where they're like, but piston operated. Could the founders have envisioned the piston? And like all of this like deeply unserious stuff that at these point they're known for, their way of dodging a Bruin analysis. But that's what this gas operated ban is sort of meant to do, and Colorado embracing it here is really just that, right? It's that the feature test is able to get around it. So they're like, oh, we're going to cast this net, but we're going to be really smart and clever about it. The only thing is they're not smart, they're not clever, and they've got a very amateurish understanding of the way guns work. And so then they're going to draft a bill that they're like, oh, we're going to ban those AK pistols. And they actually went and banned all of the Glocks, and probably also all the AK pistols too. But then they try and exempt the Glocks, and what they actually exempted is a extremely expensive niche inertia operated pistol that Benelli made for like a couple months.
Yeah, they were like, "Hey, look, we fit our shotgun thing in this handgun. You guys want it?" No.
Look, here's a perfect police pistol in the mid-late 1980s. It's got 8 rounds of 9mm. You want one? And everybody's like, no. Also, it uses an action you've never heard of, and it's kind of a mess to take apart. You want one?
It uses an action you've never heard of, and the operating pieces are made of glass. How many would you like?
And everybody's like, no thanks.
I'll take none. But yeah. Oh, but they're going to go up in price by a lot because they'll be unregulable in Colorado, except it won't even matter because they don't take a 15-round mag. So, oh boy. But anyhow, let's talk next about the California mag ban case, right? As well. It's Duncan v. Bonta, which was a big one. And we all know that the majority had a very non-serio way of looking at it. Say, not arms, this and that and the other thing. We alluded to that before. The majority said that it's okay to do this because the magazines are mere accessories.
Merely an accessory.
Yeah, they're merely accessories. And Judge Van Dyke,
he was not having this shit at all.
He did a whole ass video dissent where he,
in addition to a written dissent that was really, really well worded and explained, by the way.
Yeah. And like the majority and the concurrence spend a great deal of time just whining that he did this, that he like explains how integral to the function of the firearm the magazine is. Right. Look at him go.
The central to the majority's opinion in this case was the idea that, as we'd said, that magazines are not arms, they are merely accessories, and that anything that is an accessory that isn't critical to the function of a firearm can't be given Second Amendment protection, which is it's like comically unserious is the way that I've phrased it. It's just extremely ridiculous.
And I'll say it's retarded.
It's retarded. And Van Dyke, during oral arguments on this case, had raised many of the same questions that on this show we had also posed about this sort of analysis, where it's like, okay, if we're going to sit around in this little puddle and say, oh, everything's an accessory, well, hold on. You don't need sights for the gun to work, right?
Right.
Iron sights, red dot, whatever, right? You don't need sights for the gun to work. It actually works just as well with or without them. And so he ended up beating down the same path that I identify, right? I've identified this before as
right.
The weakness of saying that the original assault weapons banned cosmetic features is those aren't cosmetic features. Pistol grips actually make the gun a lot easier to use. Try using it without the grip. Try using it without.
Well, and each one of those things are things that you directly interact with.
Right. It's ergonomic or orthopedic or some word besides cosmetic, right? And it's not merely an accessory. Okay, if like the color red versus the color blue on the part, it's a cosmetic difference, right? That is an accessory. But the way it fits your hand or the way it fits your shoulder, the way it snaps up whenever you're trying to shoot quickly, these are all functional, important things. Really, they're integral to the way the gun works. But the majority's opinion in this case would tell you merely an accessory. And Van Dyke's dissent walked through this line by line regular text style, but he also added this video to really, really drive the point home, right? To make it so you don't, because usually to understand these things, you have to understand A, the subject matter, and then B, how to read legal writing. And that means like 3% of the population you can read it, and then like maybe 1% of that 3% care. But he went and made it in a video format in a way that is really, really easy for people to be able to understand. And I think that's why that's why the majority got very mad at him, is because he sits there and shows like he starts taking guns apart. Like he uses a SIG 320, which is probably the AR-15 of handguns, insofar as the modularity, not insofar as everything else, because the AR-15 is a good gun and the 320 is not. But he does have a very large hodgepodge of parts, and he goes through and demonstrates and shows that the idea that there is some in his written dissent, he described it as the Platonic ideal of firearms, and we can excuse his ignorance, right? Because of course the Draco is the Platonic ideal of firearm. It is the firearm from which all others stem. It is the firearm that is unadorned without accessories. It is as it should be and as God made it, and everything else is just a distraction. But I'm saying that facetiously, but the majority's opinion in this case would tell you that that thing exists, that there is a firearm that is so unadorned, and it was made in the image of the Second Amendment, and this is the gun that is protected, and that everything else flows from it accessorized. They won't tell you what that gun is, and if you put every gun in front of them, instead you cycle them through one by one, none of them would be it, right? They're never going to actually say that exists. What is that gun?
There is no true Platonic gun,
right? The
except for
gun,
Model 8.
The primordial gun with all of its feathers removed, right? What lies underneath these feathers? It's a biped. It's a man. They'll never let you find this, and that's the game that they're playing, right? That's their way of dodging a proper Bruin analysis, is to say that accessory. And Van Dyke does an excellent job of showing exactly how fucking stupid that idea is by going, which of these parts, which of these parts, I mean, it'll work like this, it'll work like this, you don't need these parts, but without that it'd be kind of hard to use it, but it doesn't work. And he gives a masterclass in that, and frankly, I think the reason he went with the video dissent is A, so it's easier to understand, but then B, so that media would poop their pants about it, because there was some pants and shitification from the so-called lamestream media.
He showed a gun.
The failing New York Times and MSDNC, as it is once again known. But they all ran to the presses screaming like, "Oh, a judge in his chambers, a judge in America has a gun."
He has an AK-47 behind him.
He's breaking decorum. It's like, no, he's not. And frankly, if more judges did this sort of thing, the faith that most people have in our judiciary would be increased.
Yeah, but transparently saying why he thinks what the thing he thought.
Right, he doesn't have to couch it in a bunch of sophistry. He can just be like, "Look at this fucking gun. I can start taking parts off of it. You tell me when it stops being a gun, okay?"
Right. Yeah, that's what he had the slide off. He's like, "This isn't useful," right? But there's something you pointed out about the specific words that he used.
Yes.
Right. And I'm gonna ask the question: How many times on this show have we talked about the platonic gun? It's been for like a year and a half now, because that's what we...
At least a year and a half.
Yeah, because that's what we were like envisioning the hitchhiker as.
Right.
And we kept just saying platonic gun, platonic gun. And then you noticed something else.
Right. That like I had a thread on Twitter that then we went and talked about on Twig. And as best I can tell, that discussion had happened before oral arguments in this particular case had happened, where I had sort of went down the rabbit hole of, okay, let's explore this idea of what is and isn't arms. The way that courts are probably going to dodge that is, well, they're going to say sights aren't arms, right? Because it's not necessary. They're going to say things like extractors on blowback guns aren't necessary, because they aren't. Most of them will work without it, and it's capable of firing a shot. They'll say that springs aren't necessary. And the Van Dyke then in oral arguments goes and asks a lot of these same questions of California's lawyer, and he is fucking dumbfounded. He does not know how to stammer. He was supposed to show up and win, right? This is the Ninth Circuit en banc. They are, since the passage of Heller, they are undefeated, right? They have never found a gun law to be violative of the Second Amendment. Never. It's been like 80 cases or whatever. It's been a bunch. And Van Dyke stands up, sits there, and says like, okay, so like, could you ban the automatic action? And he's like, the automatic action is already banned. And Van Dyke's like, no. And again, this is another thing that we talk about both on the show and on Twitter. It's highly suspicious. Either Van Dyke is just like us and we should be best friends, or he watches perhaps some amount of exposure to us at some rate would be kind of cool. Maybe that's just me being hopeful. But he goes down the line of semi-automatic is automatic, right? It's the automatic action. It feeds itself. It's automatic loading. And I'm like, yeah. It's the what's the Tarantino movie where Leonardo DiCaprio snaps and points at the TV? Oh yeah. Whichever one that is. Yeah, that. I was like, oh, he's saying my words. Yeah. It's so cool. But he trips California's lawyer up good and asks him, could you ban the semi-automatic action? And California's lawyer's like, because you can tell his real answer is, I sure hope so. I really want to. I want that so bad. I want that more than anything. But in a world where the Ninth Circuit isn't like hilariously partisan and they have an undefeated record that they need to defend like it's a fucking Super Bowl thing, they would see California's lawyer be completely unable to answer this line of questioning and go, he can't square that at all. Right. And instead of writing an opinion that just completely sides with his inability to answer very basic questions of like, okay, you circle the gun. Like, here's a picture of a gun. You circle the gun. Okay, here's the gun with one part removed. Can you circle the gun? Moved another part. Can you circle the gun? Let me know whenever the gun is in the pile of removed parts, as opposed to the pile that we're taking the parts out of. Right. Jeez. But this idea he really beat down, and I thought it was interesting that at the very least his mind works in a similar way to the way our mind works, which makes me think he's a cool guy, because it takes a special kind of idiot to be interested in the legal. The intersection of legal and gun mechanics. Yeah. So if you do watch this, can you email one of us and tell us what AK that is all blurred out behind you? And we won't tell. We just want to know. We were curious. We saw some people saying some stupid stuff on the internet that it was like a war trophy or something, or some kind of like diplomatic gift from Saudi Arabia. We need to know, Mr. Van Dyke. Yeah, please. But anyway, speaking of need to know, I need to know why you and your local businesses aren't using FFLpaymentprocessing.com, guys. Buy FFLs for FFLs, and they're hooked up with other businesses to reach out to them, let them know I sent you, and you're going to get very special rates, guys. FFLpaymentprocessing.com. If you are in the industry or adjacent, you are wasting money. You're leaving money on the table. You can get it back and also work with people who would love to work with you. FFLpaymentprocessing.com. Be sure to let them know I sent you. And on top of that, traditionalarms.com. These are zero compromise holsters and gear. This is the holster that I carry every single day with my PDP female. It's Traditional Arms LLC. It is run by my best friend, Gino, and his friend. They make these in Florida to order, or they have in-stock quick ship holsters. Guys, check them out, traditionalarms.com. Use promotional code FUDBusters.
to give me the sale. Use promotional code RATMAN to give Ivan the sale. We won't care. Just do one of them and buy the holster. It is really good. Ivan, have you gotten yours in yet?
I have not yet. I'm excited to have them though, and to play with them because they have them available for certain things. I'm not going to spoil it, but I'm going to do a video with a never before seen thing. I'm going to print a Glock and then make a video about it. I got a great idea to do this thing, but it's certainly interesting. And I had heard from Gino, if you scroll down just a little bit, I'd heard from Gino. This is orders straight from Gino. If you guys scroll down just a little bit more. That EDC dump tray. If you take a picture of your dump that you take in the tray and send it to their email, Gino said that you might get something if you send them a dump tray pic.
You know, the other fun thing is when you get one of these holsters, the wing that's on them, I actually designed that for him. So you get a little piece of my engineering in your holster as well. Do you know that? I don't know if I told you that. I didn't
know that.
Yeah.
What flavor are the wings?
Black.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Full
you can even be cleft-handed. Whoa. Yeah. Next up, we have. It's funny because we have both a anti-gun group and a pro-gun group thanking the governor of Virginia. We have the Virginia Citizens Defense League thanking. It says, "Thank you, Governor Youngkin." Or he vetoed a shitload. Look at all this.
And this is, I think, the second or third time that he's done this. That Virginia's got a Democrat-controlled legislature, and they passed. They want that state to be California so fucking bad, because I think short of like insurance, at this point they've we're requiring gun owners to carry insurance riders for the fact that they own guns, which is stupid for all of the reasons that we've already discussed on this show whenever we discussed that in the past. Besides that bill, I think Virginia signed everything that would just make them California. And so in here, there's assault weapons bans, there's rapid fire, quote unquote, rapid fire device bans. And I went and researched Virginia specifically because every time they write one of these, they write it in a retarded way where it's like, it mimics automatic fire. What the fuck does that mean? Because the Shoshaw shoots incredibly slow. They're like, it either mimics the rate of fire of an automatic weapon. I had no idea what that means. Like 300 rounds per minute. I can do that with my trigger finger.
Banned. But prohibits firearms in facilities that provide mental health or developmental facilities. Like just a lot of nonsense.
You can
storage.
You can tell how badly they want to be California. And Youngkin is like the guy standing there at the gate saying, "No, how about not? No, please. No, how about not? No, how about not?"
Jeez.
And I believe this is the second time that this bill has been so modified by Youngkin there at the very bottom that Virginia has tried to do a homemade or an unserialized ban. And Youngkin has said, "Why don't you just turn it into an undetectable firearms ban?"
Yeah, it has to be knowingly undetectable.
Right, you have to know that you've got a gun that could go through metal detector on purpose.
Right.
It's like, okay, funny. Great.
But then we have every town saying, "Oh, you're so bad." But at least we got these broad and eligible retailers to secure firearm. Blah blah.
I don't think that one's bad. That you making it tax deductible to buy a gun safe. Why not? Right? It's kind of
whatever. It's a nothing burger. Just a bunch of little things. So what did go through the gun safe tax credit? I don't care. That to me, it's not positive. It's not negative. It is what it is. Measure to require certain school professionals when contacting parents of students at imminent risk of suicide as required by law to provide materials on self-harm prevention that include legal requirements on secure storage and guidance on limiting access to lethal means. That was a lot of words to say. You have to be nice to the people who are sad.
Yeah, when Boyo McBullcut says that he's going to do it this time for real, and then his parents.
Yeah, you have to be nice to him and take his toys and put them in a box.
The cops now have to tell the parents, "Don't let him have your gun."
Yeah. A measure to give victims of crimes additional time to file claims with the compensation board and take other steps to facilitate victims' access to compensation. Okay. A measure to permit a court to find good cause to issue a preliminary protective order when a petitioner has a military protective order. Okay. A measure to require that information about the secure storage of firearms be included when parents are notified of a school's threat assessment team's determination of a student's threat of violence to themselves or others. It's like, yeah. So if you're the parent of Boyo McBullcut, you're getting another pamphlet. A measure to prohibit threats to discharge a firearm in certain public spaces. I'm gonna do it.
The Fed posting ban.
You can no longer say I'm gonna do it. That's stupid, guys. There's another story, and it's another good story, so don't go anywhere. We've got PatriotPatchCompany.com, guys. It's PatriotPatch.co. Longest time supporter of the show. Use promotional code TWIG10 to get yourself a deal and a discount. What's in the new Patch of the Month Club? Haven't gotten it in yet. We talked about the last one. Oh, look at that! It's a trademark
bunny.
It's a trademark indistinct or trademark distinct rabbit with items. It is not an Energizer rabbit. It is powered by shot shells, a limited run PVC patch and sticker. I'd be interested to see that one when it comes in. I'm excited to see that. What else do we got? You
can tell that the trademark is entirely distinct from Energizer because of the fact that that is a magazine-fed shotgun. A detachable magazine-fed shotgun. Yes. And while Energizer will keep on running and running, the Saiga 12
will not.
Will not.
Yeah. Yeah, we have tons of patches, guys. Look at this. Oh, look at all these different ones. They're on sale. They're on sale. My favorite patches, the Dangerous to Go Alone ones, are on sale. They're like $7, guys, and go, or yeah, $9.99. Some of them are $7. Check out the website. Just browse around. It's fun to do. And use promotional code TWIG10 to get yourself a fat Dick's count. At Dick's count. Last up, National Gun Control Group lays off most staff. This is on the Reload. A good Gutowskital. March for Our Lives is slashing its employees and appointing a new leader. This is after they did not get their Bloomberg stimmy re-upped.
Gen Z understands what that means.
Yeah. Announced it would cut ties with 13 of its 16 full-time staffers last week. Wow. Also named a new executive director, Jacqueline Corin, a 25-year-old Parkland Survivor Group co-founder, will take the reins over the other two idiots as the organization attempts to navigate bumpy terrain in the wake of the 2024 election. We are facing financial challenges as an organization, not unlike many nonprofit advocacy organizations in this time. And then blah, 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 blah. All right, it was a bunch of nonsense. Then finally, we have a story that Ivan added without telling me. Oh, it's a Costas post.
Yeah.
It's the Costas Oikos Greek yogurt. When my wife asked me when I will finally do the yard work I promised I would do.
rescheduled.
Yeah, that's all of the hardware ban cases. All of them.
Right. There's the magazine ban case and the assaulty weapons ban case, and now also added to the continually getting relisted cases, Adamiak out of New York, their concealed carry Bruin response law is now joined the getting relist roller coaster.
Yeah. So anyway,
I guess that's really just to say that nothing ever happens is true, and maybe eventually something will happen. And I'm done trying to read tea leaves about this one. I don't know if they're waiting for the 9th Circuit or the 7th Circuit, or I just think they're just doing whatever they want.
Just kicking the can. Well, whatever. Everything is relisted. Everything is fine. No, it's whatever. Yeah, I at least get to happily say I was right and tea leaf reading doesn't work. It's all bullshit.
Per curiam is coming. Have faith, brothers. Per curiam decision, just like in Caetano, they're just going to say, knock it the fuck off. Heller and Bruin already got this one answered. Yeah. I don't think they're going to do that. But
done and dusted, boyos. All right, guys. That's it for the moment. Be sure that you're on one or both of our Patreons. Get access to the Discord. Check the links down below. Either one of our Patreon gives you Discord access. You will be bullied. Do not come in expecting to be treated softly. If you say
will be bullied differently based on where you came from too.
Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, you should do that. You should support our work. We have cool things happening, and there's a lot of stuff that you can only see in there. So,
yeah, the Femboy Furry Art channel.
Again, over my strenuous objection. But anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, we will see you next time.